This is Training Insights, episode 15. Welcome to episode 15 of Training Insights here on trainingmag.com, brought to you, of course, by Training Magazine. My name is Kevin McGowan. Thanks for listening. This is episode 15. This is the last episode we're going to do for the year 2017. Already have a bunch scoped out for 2018, so we're going to take a little break for the rest of the year. Hope you all enjoy your holiday season. Today we're going to speak with Craig Ross. He is the author, actually co-author, of a new book called Do Big Things. It's all about how to mobilize hearts and minds and make an epic impact on your team. We're going to talk about how executive training, obviously it has its place and it can be very good, but sometimes it can be a challenge because the expectation is often that you go off and train the leaders, but may not impact the team the way you really want it to. So we're going to talk about kind of a holistic approach to having your team mobilize and do a lot of big things. So I don't want to give it all away. So here we go. Here's my conversation on the phone with Craig Ross.
And Craig Ross, welcome to Training Insights.
Kevin, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be with you.
I'm really glad to talk to you. I know you've got a new book. It's coming out, or it just came out September, correct? Do Big Things?
That's correct. Yep. Wiley publication came out end of September.
What sounds interesting to me. I mean, I'll just kind of read off the subtitle: the simple steps teams can take to mobilize hearts and minds and make an epic impact. I've been working, 25 years ish, and not to make myself sound too old, but I always hear about the minds part. The heart is kind of a new element in this, in terms of working with teams and working with leaders. There seems to be a new admission that maybe the heart should be involved too. At least from my experience. I'm wondering why you would specify heart and mind and how this applies to leadership.
Yeah, we've come a long way, haven't we, Kevin? I mean, when you and I were younger in our careers, in serving the organizations, global Fortune 500 organizations, we couldn't even use the word culture. It wasn't that long ago where culture was too touchy-feely, wasn't it? And now leaders and teams everywhere clearly understand what so many were saying a while ago is culture eats strategy for, of course, breakfast, and I would add lunch and dinner and dessert and everything else. And so when you look at the research and what's occurring out there, it's really clear that we are emotional human beings. And our emotion, as Daniel Goleman in his research talks about, what we're emotional about is where we focus. And so we've got to get this heart part right.
And how have you come to this conclusion? Is it something that kind of evolves for you, or is it something you've really known all along?
Well, thank you. I think, all of us know this. I mean, all of us know that. I haven't met a professional anywhere who doesn't want to do good things. There are a few exceptions to that, of course, and when those people are put into a system where they're enabled, of course, it gets destructive. But our organization at Verus Global, for 25 years, much like your experience, 65,000 plus hours in the field, 39 different countries, working with and studying teams, those that struggle and those that achieve and do big things. We just finally identified a framework, really a recipe that when it comes to the thinking and actions are essential for teams to realize their potential.
Well, then let's discuss the framework then. There are several steps, 7, I think you said. But just in general terms, what is this framework that you're speaking of? How do we grow to this point?
Well, one of the things that are really important to establish, Kevin, first is a lot of people are focused on, trust. We got to build trust, or collaboration, or alignment. And most organizations are famous for putting their list of values, behaviors, targeted values and behaviors on the wall. We all know this. And yet I love to tell that story. How many of us have ever experienced this when we're walking into a grocery store with children, and right before you enter the grocery store, we look at the children and we say, now when we get in there, you have to behave. And I love asking audiences, hey, what's your success rate? And they always scream out, laugh, it's 0. Well, it's the same thing that's occurring in organizations is telling humans how to think and behave doesn't work. And so what we did is we stepped that back and we reverse engineered our process. We looked at what the experts are saying in terms of what is the thinking and the actions that actually bring forth greater trust, that bring forth greater collaboration, and so forth. And then we broke those down into 7 specific steps. Things such as committing to the human imperative, committing to the human imperative, energizing around a shared reality. We just know for a fact that these things are essential for trust, collaboration, and the behaviors necessary to win, for those things to come forward.
Do you feel is this kind of a top-down thing, do you think, or is this just a holistic approach for a whole team? Like you focus, I think, on leadership training primarily, but how does that apply to the entire team? How do we build that trusting relationship, especially maybe if it's not there? How do you start?
Yeah, I just blogged on this, and this is really, really important. Kevin, your question is bigger and more significant than I think most people are paying attention to.
Yeah.
No joke, because we call it the dirty fish tank model. Most organizations think that if I develop a leader, I'll develop a team. So
right.
they literally, in the U.S. alone, we're spending billions of dollars to send leaders off to training and then bring them back, and nothing happens in terms of change. It's like trying to clean a dirty fish tank by removing the fish, scrubbing them, and then putting them back into a dirty fish tank.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that.
Well, it's happening everywhere, and it's costly. Yeah. And where it's really costly is then organizations are blaming that fish for not creating change in the fish tank, and that's not fair to the fish either. And so we develop leaders in the context of teams, and this way we know 3 big things happen: that we have a common language, we have the ability to shift and adapt our focus where and when necessary collectively. And number 3, we are functioning from a shared reality. And those things are essential for a team to succeed. And so, your question is so critical is how do we develop our leaders? Well, actually, in the context of teams is the most powerful way.
Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to formulate my next question as a follow-up in my head. So bear with me a second. If I'm in the team and say, I'm in a crisis situation on my team, or it's just, things aren't going well, maybe as well as they could be. Is it best to sit down everybody together and kind of do this as a team? Like how do you, because that's expense too, right? So in terms of your bottom line, it's cheaper probably to send the leader off and hope that filters down. But how do you approach it when the whole team needs to function better to make this impact you're talking about?
Yeah, thank you. Bottom line, leadership matters, but teams deliver. And we need to, as a society, continue to move away from an industrial era mindset. And really, let's go all the way back to kings and queens, this top-down approach. We're not going to suggest that developing a leader doesn't have an impact. So yes, this framework can be used by leaders at the top to develop a more functional, high-performing team that can do big things. Mm-hmm. But what we want to suggest is that what's changed is leaders today are on as many teams as you and I are, the people who are not in positional authority. Mm-hmm. On top of that, because organizations are so lean, leaders are having to do as much of the work as some of their teammates.
Yeah.
And this is where we're seeing organizations stub their toe, is they're still functioning from this idea of if I just develop a leader, then the team is going to have their breakthrough. So by long answer here, but to getting to your point, I think you're pointing at, is we've got to equip the entire team. And this is what's exciting. We're seeing hundreds of examples of people who do not have positional authority adopt these 7 steps and actually influence upwards. In other words, they're influencing the organization in a 360 sort of effect just by shaping the thinking and actions of those above them, next to them, and below them.
Mm-hmm. Now, are you speaking primarily in terms of teams that are functioning and just can do better, or is there a different level for a team that might be in a crisis position where this leadership isn't functioning, the team isn't functioning? How do you approach either of those scenarios?
I'm going to give away some of our business success. I'm often asked, why is Verus Global, why have you been around so long? How come you're so successful? And,
right.
and I like to say it's because we work with successful organizations. We work with successful teams. Mm-hmm. Because over the years, we found that there are plenty of leaders and teams that want to do big things, but they don't believe in the human heart. They don't believe in the human imperative as it relates to doing big things. We don't work with organizations like that. Mm-hmm. From time to time, we run into organizations that do believe that, and yes, they're in crisis, and so we do. There is an intervention, if you will, approach.
Right.
However, oftentimes the organizations we work with the most are seeking ways to systematize activating the human potential in their team and organization. Those are the clients we have.
Fascinating. So obviously, I mean, it's like any other thing. You realize I can do better than I'm doing. How do I do that? And people will call you and get the advice and perspective on how to up their game, essentially.
You got it. I mean, let's think about the human body as an example. There are people that know they should be eating better and be more physically fit, and yet they're never really serious about making that commitment to a membership, to a gym, as an example.
Right. I'm stuck in my gut a little bit while you're telling me this story.
And as we round out the year, I know we're all doing our self-assessment, aren't we? No doubt. But it's about organizations that understand that the human heart, how we function in terms of our intrinsic motivations, what's important to us, what we value, our purpose. When that's aligned with an organization's purpose, a team's purpose, a team's mission or vision, man, magical things happen.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you one more question. Because you keep coming back to this theme of the heart and mind. I mean, we started off with this question too, but how is there an aha moment? People, they kind of, okay, we're not functioning as well as we can. How do I engage, the people right there in the heart? And no one can see this. I'm pointing to mine right now. Like, how do I hit them right there to make them understand that this is important?
Yeah, you got it. What I love about our framework is it's been refined over the last 25 years is it's very, very practical. In fact, many people will say, hey, this is actually natural for me. And where I'm going with that, Kevin, is most organizations and leaders and teams do what's normal. And this is why we see high levels of organizations that are suffering from what we call DSD. They're distracted, they're off focus, they're distracted, they're hopelessly stressed, and they're disconnected from their purpose, from each other, and so forth. That's because they're doing what's normal. They're functioning, they're numbing themselves down from very common execution questions, such as, okay, what do we need to get done? Who's going to do it? When are we going to do it? What resources do we have? And if we just take one of the steps to answer your question, step 7, mobilize hearts and minds, and you do that through different types of questions, questions that remind people of purpose, questions that tap into the vision that not just I as the leader have, but that the team has, man, all of a sudden we elevate consciousness. And that's what I haven't met a human being who doesn't want to have their consciousness elevated, right? We want to function at a higher level. Well, that's what's natural, and this is a method for doing that day to day.
Well, that's very inspiring, Craig. I'm going to leave it there because I don't want to ruin that moment. But I want to say thank you very much.
Thanks for creating it.
This has been a really eye-opening conversation for me. I really appreciate the time.
I do too, Kevin. Thanks for your good work, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you, Craig Ross, so much for the conversation. I learned a lot. I always learn a lot when I do these interviews. That's one of the reasons I guess I'm doing this, frankly, is I get to learn a lot from everybody I talk to. And I'm curious if you'd like to be on the podcast, drop me a line, go to kevinmcgowan.ca, or you can get in touch with us through trainingmag.com as well. Now, Craig is the president CEO of Verus Global. You can find out more about them at verusglobal.com. That's VERUS global.com. Thanks so much for listening. Again, the last episode of the year, so have yourself a great holiday season, and we'll see you back in 2018. Thanks.